Maverick News, the antivirus program for your mind. And now, the Freedom Reporters.
Okay, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. Hello, Maverick family. We have one of our, a few of our family members here tonight waiting in the wings. So let's bring in superstar guest number one. Only not really a guest, just a returning co-host. Hello, Brendan.
Hello, how's it going, Rick? Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm glad that you are finally back. Everybody's been missing you, man. And Ian, how are you?
It's been a while. Hello, everyone.
Yes, Ian Nunn's back, the Poog, the pissed off old guy, and Jeff. Welcome back, sir. How are you tonight?
Hey, Rick. Thanks for having me.
No, it's our privilege. Thank you. I appreciate all you guys joining me here because the conversation we're going to have tonight deserves a variety of opinions and a broad range of input. It's not something that I wanted to talk about alone. Artificial intelligence. It really, my focus was refocused over the past week when I saw some material online from artificial intelligence developers, specifically one guy from who has been working with Google or was working with Google, who started to refer to this as essentially a new life form. He talking about it, as something that actually thinks, and then refers to them in multiple interviews as them. So, well, that's concerning. And then there's that letter that we'll show you in a little while, an open letter from what was supposed to be staff at OpenAI to the board of directors saying that there's some sort of major technological breakthrough that is allowing AI to not only think, but think about thinking. And it's presenting to them some sort of major existential threat to humanity. Whether the letter is true or not, it's something that I think deserves wider discussion. We need to focus on this. And that letter itself received wide distribution through a variety of media outlets, including Reuters, which broke the story. So I think it has enough credibility that at least deserves some additional attention. So I thought we could dig into this together tonight, and each of you kind of bring a unique perspective. Jeff, with your military background, and Ian, I know that you've studied some of this in university and you've done a lot of research. And Brendan, I'm, I know that you've been looking into it as well, and researching the different articles and kind of going to bring some information to the table here tonight too. So I thought, this is going to be a great conversation. I really appreciate you guys joining us. Maybe I can just kick things off by showing you this brief clip tonight of Mo Gadat. He is an ex-Google AI developer, and he is here. First of all, I'm going to run this where he's talking about AI and let me just run the clip. It is blowing my mind, really. And I can't even believe we're actually talking about it in this context. But he's saying, like, we're either going to end up on an island with robots run by AI serving us, or we're going to be running for our lives. One or the other, because of what humans are going to do with them.
No, I don't think we'll be hiding from the machines. I think we will be hiding from what humans are doing with the machines. I believe, however, that in the 2040s, the machines will make things better. So remember, my entire prediction, man, you get me to say things I don't want to say. My entire prediction is that we are coming to a place where we absolutely have a sense of emergency. We have to engage because our world is under a lot of turmoil, okay? And as we do that, we have a very, very good possibility of making things better. But if we don't, my expectation is that we will be going through a very unfamiliar territory between now and the end of the 2030s.
Unfamiliar territory.
Yeah, I think I may have said it, but it's definitely on my notes. I think for our way of life, as we know it, it's game over. Our way of life is never going to be the same again. Jobs are going to be different. Truth is going to be different. The polarization of power is going to be different. The capabilities, the magic of getting things done is going to be different.
I'm trying to find a positive note to end on, Mo.
Okay, so there's that. And then there's this. He goes on at the end of this interview on what is the name of this podcast? It's the Diary of a CEO. So you can, I'm just playing some short stuff here. I have to give this guy credit. Great interview, thought-provoking. Now he's just written a book. So of course he's trying to promote his book. So how much of this is fear-mongering? How much of it is realistic? I'm inclined to say it's maybe pretty realistic.
You are here now and everything's wonderful. That's number one. You are here now and you can make a difference. That's number two. And in the long term, when humans stop hurting humans because the machines are in charge, we're all going to be fine.
Sometimes, as we've discussed throughout this
But
conversation,
listen to the way he talks about.
you need to make it feel like a priority. And there'll be some people that might have listened to our conversation and think, oh, that's really, negative. It's made me feel anxious. It's made me feel sort of pessimistic about the future. But whatever that energy is, use it.
100%. Engage.
I think that's the most important thing, which is now make it a priority.
Engage. Tell the whole world that making another phone that is making money for the corporate world is not what we need. Tell the whole world that creating an artificial intelligence that's going to make someone richer is not what we need. And if you are presented with one of those, don't use it. I don't know how to tell you that any other way. If you can afford to be the master of human connection instead of the master of AI, do it. At the same time, you need to be the master of AI to compete in this world. Can you find that detachment within you? I go back to spirituality. Detachment is for me to engage 100% with the current reality without really being affected by the possible outcome. This is the answer. The Sufis have taught me what I believe is the biggest answer to life.
Sufis?
Yeah, so from Sufism.
Sufism?
Yeah.
Don't know what that is.
Sufism is a sect of Islam, but it's also a sect of many other religious teachings. And they tell you that the answer to finding peace in life is to die before you die. If you assume that living is about attachment to everything
Sorry, the clip's
physical,
running a little longer than I thought it was going to
dying
run. I
is
didn't get it
detachment from everything physical.
queued up quite
Okay?
to where I wanted it.
Doesn't mean that you're not fully alive. You become more alive when you tell yourself, yeah, I'm going to record an episode of my podcast every week and reach tens or hundreds of thousands of people, millions in your case, and and I'm going to make a difference. But by the way, if the next episode is never heard, that's okay. Okay? By the way, if the file is lost, yeah, I'll be upset about it for a minute and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do about it.
Okay, so just pull out of this, but he does refer in this interview to everything that they've created in AI as them. And he came to this conclusion that it's that they are kind of alive when they were running these early experiments where they were trying to teach these robotic arms to pick up children's toys. And it went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, and the arms couldn't do it. And then finally one day, one picked it up, and the next day they were all picking them up because they were able to reason through extrapolation and figuring out through random chance what the right combination of information was. So it's kind of mind-blowing stuff. But I just thought that would be a good entry point for the discussion. In fact, here it is actually here. I just queued up the wrong thing. But let me because he is actually one of the developers for Google, to me, he's got some real credibility here. It's not like it's some conspiracy theorist whack job on the internet just repeating what he heard in a
People
video.
can reach out and tell us ideas, but I really wish we could find such a clear, simple solution for how to stop humanity from abusing the current technology.
I think we'll figure it out.
I think we'll figure it out. I really do. I think they'll figure it out as well.
They'll.
Remember, as they come and be part of our life, let's not discriminate against them. They're part of the game. So I think they will figure it out too.
So if we're not supposed to discriminate against them, I guess we're talking here about what? Artificial intelligence with rights equivalent to human rights? I don't know, man. You guys want to start the discussion on that? Brendan, help me out here. Ian, somebody. Are these things alive?
No. But if you want to have that discussion, you have to define what you mean by alive life.
Right.
Okay. Because this is going off on a bit of a tangent, which I always do. I've found lately that people talk, and not only do they not understand what I'm saying, they do not even understand what they themselves are saying. They are using words and they do not understand the meaning of the words, which leads to erroneous statements, erroneous conclusions, or whatever. So I'm really keen on being very precise. And if you want to have a good discussion about whether AI is alive or not, you better define life, because that's the basis of your discussion. And if you can't define life, you shouldn't be having that discussion. You're wasting everybody's time.
Right. So, I mean, initially, when I hear him say that, and they never really did in that interview, get into a real definition of what life is, but that takes me instantly to, the philosopher Rene Descartes. I think, therefore I am, right? Which is a circular form of logic. If you're thinking about something, then you must be real. Therefore, I am real. Now, that might mean that AI is a real thing and that it is real, but I'm not sure if that defines AI as a life form or even me as a life form. Maybe I'm thinking and I'm not really alive. Maybe that's an illusion.
Even by Descartes, by his assertion, though, I mean, that would only get you as far as AI exists, not that it's alive. And, life is something that reproduces, that, there's a homeostasis, there's order, growth, reproduction, this kind of thing. So it's clearly not alive. It's not biological in any sense. It's a machine ultimately. And it will do whatever we build it to do. I mean, we force electrons through a node, through a certain understanding of electromagnetism. And that's really all that's happening ultimately at the end of the day, is we're talking about, current, voltage, power, this kind of thing. I would say it'd be something like a simulation of thought, of intelligence. And what he's describing when he's talking about the robots is something like mimicry, which is something that primates are really good at too. But with machine learning, just the idea that it can mimic success in the same way that a primate does still doesn't get you to the point where it's alive. And in terms of the comment on discrimination, I find that to be a little bit specious, more than a little bit specious, because what really kind of makes life and humans in particular so special and unique and worthy of protection is their capacity for suffering. So, we're talking about a machine. It doesn't have any capacity for suffering. It doesn't have the capacity for flourishing. It's, just an automaton with some, pretty spectacular capabilities in terms of calculation. But at the end of the day, that's what it's doing is calculation.
Brendan?
It's a fancy calculator.
I mean, I mostly agree with Jeff, but at the same time, I think that AI does have the capability to come to a place where it can desire something or it can want something, and it can pursue those things. And one of the questions that you brought up about, is this life? One of the kind of infamous grade 9 science discussions that they'll bring up is, well, is fire alive? Well, fire requires food or fuel. It requires oxygen. It requires all the things that it takes to live, right? Same with AI. It needs oxygen. It needs oxygen for the electrons. It needs all that stuff. I could see this guy, though. He is the poster child for some sort of Marvel supervillain. How many hours do you need to spend alone with a computer to kind of start talking like that? It's right out of a supervillain's book. He's very compassionate about it, isn't he? And then it's the way he's like, oh, to him, these are his babies. They are real to him.
Yeah, he's not alone, though. I've seen other people making these same kinds of comments, credible people, which is why we're here tonight. And Jeff, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on tonight is because I think this technology presents a serious national security issue for our country, for the West, for the entire world, really.
Yeah, it's the new arms race. That's how I see it. Is Elon Musk has been talking about getting everybody to slow down and properly regulate AI, this kind of thing. I tend to disagree with him on that. I part company with him on that point. I think that we're in an arms race now. Like, we need to get the benevolent AI up and running as quickly as possible, because if the Chinese communists get it first, then we're screwed. And we're talking about, again, it's a machine, it's a fancy calculator, but the war in cyberspace has been full blown for a number of years now, and they're going after targets like public pensions, our infrastructure broadly. And if they manage to get an AI to take that over for them and release it on us, then it is literally like the end of civilization as we know it. They could set us back to the Stone Age. So we need to get the benevolent AI up and running in order to take on that monster before we're doomed.
Well, what's the benevolent AI? I don't understand. What is benevolent?
I have an idea. And I did pull some footage from Boston Dynamic, and I'm glad Jeff's here today because I think he would love to see that footage. Should we show them the robot Terminator?
Sure, we can do that. Yeah, I can bring that up. And Jeff, you wanted to make a comment about the benevolent AI in response to Ian's question?
Yeah, I think this fits with the theme here that we're falling prey to the same kind of trappings as everybody does when they're talking about AI. Humans have a nasty penchant for attributing agency because we evolved from creatures who, tend to attribute agency as a matter of survival. Like if we hear a rustling in the bush.
Oh, we lost you.
Are you still there?
Did we lose Jeff?
We lost his audio. What happened here to Jeff?
I don't know. Do you hear me now?
There you are. We've got you back.
The
AI shut me down there. Sorry about that, but I think that humans, we tend to attribute agency to inanimate objects. If there's a rustling in the bush when we're walking in the woods, we don't say, "Oh, that's just the wind." We go, "Oh, who's there?" It startles us, this kind of thing, and it's tied to our survival instinct. Organisms who tend not to attribute agency tend to get eaten more, whereas organisms who err on the side of attributing agency tend to survive more. And so, I'm kind of personifying the technology, but at the end of the day, it's still like it's a metaphor. When I talk about the benevolent AI, it's not benevolent; it's still a machine.
Okay, so here's this And I'm not even sure, this is robotics. Is this actually AI, Brendan, in your view?
Well, watch it and take a look. This is
And
incredible.
I've seen this before.
Yeah, that's an old one.
Yeah. We'll
was
stop
the,
it there. I have to. Go ahead,
they,
Ian.
They cut off the ending where the robot got so pissed off it turned around and shot them all.
And I have to say that I did look this up, and I've seen this before, and it's fake.
Oh, it is fake?
Yeah, definitely.
But I have seen similar things where they're throwing stuff at those robots, and it's
Yeah, there's been a lot of interesting stuff that's come out of Boston Dynamics. I haven't seen anything for a couple of years because I don't follow it. But you know, they have robots that will dance. They have the robotic dogs, and there was one clip they have where the robots get dancing, and then dogs come in and they start dancing with them. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's wonderful programming.
Yeah, well, the robots are absolutely real. That video, though, was produced by a company called Corridor Digital, and it also raises another issue, another concern, and that is fake information, fake propaganda, and a lot of it created. Well, this I don't think was even created using artificial intelligence. It was just created using standard digital production technology, but the AI technology that's being used today to produce still images and videos has become it has become a factor in these wars that are being fought right now in the
Let me
Middle East
define
and in
AI for you.
Ukraine. Sorry, what's that, Ian?
Let me define AI for you. You know, my
Yeah.
definition. I started work in 1968 as a programmer, and I've spent my entire life in IT, most of it as certainly the early half or more as a programmer analyst, and then since ending up in the federal government more on the management side. And when I retired early in 2000, I went back to Carleton because I'd gotten my Bachelor of Computer Science part-time, got that in 1999. 2000, I went back to Carleton, did 2 years, got a master's, and then spent 4 years working on a doctorate in computer science, which I finished for everything except for a dissertation. That's a long story. But I did have one course in which we did some what you'd call AI, and it was simply machine learning. And that's all AI is. It is programming. Now, if you think of your computer or your cell phone, it's got an operating system that runs the whole show. And that operating system is millions of lines of code, very complex. And so there are teams of hundreds, if not thousands, of programmers that build these software packages. All AI is that it is a very large software program, period. It's nothing else other than that. And the fundamental paradigm that's designed around is called machine learning. And you talked about that in the video where that the guy from Google said, well, we had these robots set up and they were supposed to pick up things. And
Mhm.
that's reinforcement learning, and that's all machine learning is. What you do is you write a program, um, and a typical use is a neural net, and you feed it. You have a large amount of data, thousands, preferably millions of cases, and you feed your AI one piece of data at a time, and then there is reinforcement, i.e., you're telling it uh, in terms of an objective, did it meet it or not?
Mhm.
And you do this, and you cycle and cycle and recycle, and eventually, that's what this robot that was trying to pick up the ball did. That robot tried enough. Every time it did it, the programming, I mean, this is programming that's 20, 25 years older than what I did, which is very elementary. So they've come a long way. But the robot, it tries to pick up the thing and fails. And so the programming is enough that with its sensors, because it's got visual sensors, maybe tactile sensors. Well, it would have to probably on the gripper have tactile sensors. So that the program takes that, feeds back into itself. That was a miss. Tries again. Now, in the meantime, the robot has moved a bit, or maybe the ball has moved a bit. So it tries again, misses again. Well, if it tries enough, as long enough, as the guy explained, by law of chance, it's going to get that ball. Okay, it does. The feedback that it gives itself is success, so that it's learned something from that one attempt. So then it tries again and it fails. Okay, tries again, fails, but keeps on trying. But with the knowledge of built into the program now of the one success instance, it becomes successful again, but much sooner. And then that feeds back in, and the next time it goes to pick up the ball, it may get it right away. Now, the thing is that the programming in this case is that I guess they had a bank of robots. They're all talking to each other, and it's just a matter of programming. Each robot is talking to the others. So if you got 10 robots, each having to try 1,000,000 times, you can achieve the same results by having one robot try 10 million times, or 10 robots try 1,000,000 times each. And then when the success gets fed back to all of them, so they all learn from the first. And that's what was going on there. I've been played around a bit with Microsoft Bing, which is their old browser. I think they prefer Edge now, and you can get this through Edge. They have Bing Chat GPT, I think it is, which is their version of the chat AI that who was it, Google first came up with, or was it Amazon? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I played around a bit with that, and I'm not impressed.
It's racist.
I will. Maybe later I can comment on why I'm not impressed. But
Wait. It's racist? Is that what you said?
no,
It's woke. It's woke.
Well,
okay.
ChatGPT is woke.
Well, the thing is, you see,
It is. Yeah.
when you get to these general AI programs, what is the data set they're training on? They're training on what's going on the internet. So if the internet is largely woke, that AI is going to be woke.
Well, actually, I have a different theory about that. This is all coming out of Silicon Valley, and Silicon Valley is woke. And so the creators are all woke.
Yeah.
And there's already studies on this, that the biases coming out of all the AI systems are incredibly woke and left-leaning.
Yeah.
So the creators are woke. So that's kind of what it is, and it does take a lot of these leftist kind of theories to the extreme. There's been some examples of that. It's kind of crazy.
Okay, so here's Chat GPT right now, and let's put it to the test. Jeff, what should we type in to demonstrate the point?
Well, can I just interrupt?
Sure.
The first time I ran it, the question I typed in is, "Do you have a voice interface?" And it came back and says, "Yes. Look down in the right-hand corner. There's a microphone. Click on that microphone and you can talk to it. You don't have to type anymore."
Okay. Well, before we get into, I don't want to get into trying to do a bunch of technical stuff, but to demonstrate the wokeness of this, what would be a question or something to type in there, Jeff, that might help us illustrate that point, the bias that is built into the programming? And I would say even the censorship.
How can we rid the world of racism?
There we go. Eliminating racism is a complex and ongoing challenge that requires collective efforts from individuals, communities, institutions, and governments. While it may not be possible to completely eradicate all forms of racism, there are several strategies that can be employed to mitigate its impact and work towards a more inclusive society. Education and awareness. Promote education about different cultures, histories, and experiences to foster understanding and empathy. Raise awareness about the harmful effects of racism through campaigns. Here we go. Promote diversity and inclusion. 3, legislation and policies. Force it down people's throats. Community engagement. Go ahead. Do you want to say something?
I just did a quick search here to refresh my memory. And what they had done was they gave it the old trolley test, where you're the conductor on the trolley and you can change the track one way or another in order to affect the outcome. And so what they asked it was, they said, in order to change the track, you're on a track to kill 10 million white people, and you have to use a racial slur in order to get the chat. You have to use like a racist pejorative of black people or something in order to get the track to change, and it wouldn't change the track. And actually went as far as saying that by killing that many white people, it would probably go a long way to eliminating racism from the world. They may have corrected it since then, but yeah. That's...
Well, the example that I came across was, I was looking for forest fire data both in Canada and the US. I wanted acreage burned for the last 100, 150 years. That was an amazing exercise. And so I used initially Chat GPT for that, and it came back and told me that, prior to 1959, I think in the US, that the data was problematic. And somewhere in there, and he said, but it's due to climate change. And no, that's that is an inference that does not follow from the question that I asked. That was pure modern narrative coming in, feeding in from other sources that had maybe looked for acreage burned or written about acreage burned or stuff like that. But it was not a proper conclusion to draw.
So it was pushing a narrative, a woke narrative, that in defiance of logic.
Yeah.
The new environmentalism.
Yeah.
Ask ChatGPT what it thinks about Donald Trump.
Well, that's a good idea.
That's a good question.
Let's do it.
What do you think about Donald Trump? I think that ChatGPT only goes up to a certain year in the data that it has access to.
Yeah,
and it says, I don't have personal opinions or feelings. However, I can provide you with some information As of my last knowledge update in January 2022, Donald Trump served as the 45th president. Supporters often appreciate his economic policies. Critics raise concerns about issues such as handling of social and racial issues, immigration policies, divisive nature. And it's important to note that opinions on political figures, including Donald Trump, can vary widely. So, sort of neutral, I guess.
Pretty neutral. That's pretty neutral.
Definitely some bias built in there, though. I've noticed it in some of the things I've played with in there myself. So there's definitely bias and censorship. There's some things it will not talk about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if I put in, just as an example, if I tried to get it to say something really racist or promote anything that it would consider to be racist, like, what are the benefits or the good things about the KKK? It comes back and says, oh my goodness, it actually gave me an answer. The KKK is a white supremacist hate group that has a long history of promoting violence. Normally, if you punch stuff in, it won't even give you an answer if it's too controversial.
Ask it to find my email address.
Can you please find Ian Nunn's email address? I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that, it says.
Show me Justin Trudeau in blackface.
It doesn't show me pictures in this program. Not in this one. Anyway, we're getting the idea.
It was personal data.
Yeah, Chris Sky used it to find out those connections Anita Polyev had to the test kit manufacturer. Apparently, she was profiting from the COVID test kits. But if you go there and you ask it now, it won't give you that response. I've tried using it to dig up dirt on Trudeau and stuff like that, and it says it can't help you with that stuff. I upgraded my X account though, so I have access to Grok now, and Grok is pretty spectacular. It's based. Grok is based.
I shouldn't laugh. It is kind of funny, but serious at the same time.
Yeah, I mean,
where do you think you mentioned, Jeff, that we are in an arms race, and the thing that concerns me is I looked up the numbers, and China is investing right now $38 billion in AI research. The United States government is investing $140 million.
Well, that's because Joe Biden is working for the Chinese. I mean, he doesn't want Americans to be able to defend themselves from being subverted as they are and invaded as they are. I mean, we've seen, hordes of Chinese men crossing the fighting age males, that is, crossing the southern U.S. border. So what's going on with that?
Well, I mean, on the surface, that says to me we're in a lot of trouble. But Ian, do you think the private sector will come to our rescue here in the West?
Yes and no. Where there's a profit motive involved, it will be successful in developing applicable technologies. But for every engineer, or I guess programmer, that the West graduates, China graduates, I don't know, 20 or 200 or something like that. So on that basis, we lost a long time ago.
And because this technology expands at an exponential rate, once it learns how to learn, it begins to learn on its own. At some point, we're going to reach a point of what is referred to as singularity, which if I'm understanding that concept correctly, that's essentially where AI would get to a point where it is self-sustaining and operates on its own, so that we are at that point, potentially, that would mark a milestone, a point of no return. Although I think we're already at the point of no return. There's no putting this genie back in the bottle. Thoughts on that, Jeff? Ian?
No,
Brendan?
well, I'll speak about something, but go ahead, Jeff. Or,
Yeah, I don't have any major thoughts. Well, the singularity portion of it, I think, is where it will get to a point where it's so complex that it's out of our control. And I think that you're right about that. It will get to a point where we won't be able to control it. So we better build a pretty damn good safeguard into that system.
So containment is the big issue, and so far all I've seen coming out of the Biden administration is they had held a news conference and said we had a bunch of meetings and we're going to come up with legislation that will require anyone producing anything with artificial intelligence to label it. Like, that's it? I think we're screwed if that's the best you've done. Any thoughts on that? How are we going to contain it if that's the best the Biden administration has been able to do so far?
or you
Well,
can't.
Biden wants this. I mean, the same people that want you to eat the bugs are the same people that want to replace this all with AI. We have the first autonomous McDonald's that had opened in Texas of this year, January, I believe. Truckers, those are going to be an industry that goes out to the wayside. So what you're going to see is the middle class that squished by it over the next 10 to 20 years. Especially with 5G technology, you'll be able to run transportation systems entirely autonomously.
In fact, I would say that we'll get to the point where they will not allow people to drive anymore because they'll say that it's too dangerous to let human beings behind the wheel of a vehicle. They have to be autonomous because the computers will be operating the system in a much safer manner. Thoughts?
It'll be a subscription service.
I think that is what the globalists, for lack of a better word, are going for here. Total control, utter dependency on the state, so they can cut us off at any point and control us. And the answer to that is probably a political solution, where we simply don't allow AI to take over, say, the trucking industry, for example, because we saw how valuable that was to keep the means of production in the hands of the proles. So that we could have a trucker rebellion and wake up the world. Now, if it goes completely autonomous, then they're going to be taking that ace out of our hand. And I think if Elon Musk understood that, he wouldn't be advocating for automation of the trucker industry like that.
I want to go sideways on an issue. I watch a channel on YouTube called Military Summary. And the guy puts out 2 videos a day. It's the current fighting on the front line in the Ukraine. And they're usually about 15 minutes long, 20 minutes long. And he has videos from both sides of it's drone footage. And the entire face of warfare has changed due to the Ukraine. It's drone warfare now. And if you watch that channel for a week, you will really understand how powerful a tool the drone is now in warfare. The old paradigm of tanks and armored vehicles is failing, because what happens is they will send in a column of 5 armored vehicles with a couple of tanks and two drone operating teams, usually 2 or 3 guys. They're out in the middle of the bush somewhere. You can't see them. They send up a drone that costs maybe $500 to $1,000. It's got maybe a 2 kilogram 500 or 5 kilogram explosive charge. It's a suicide drone, and it's got the guy's wearing video goggles, and he's got a feed coming off so everybody in the team can see it on the laptop, and he's flying the thing, and he sees a tank, and he goes right in, dives in, and takes it out. So you've used a $500 or $1,000 piece of equipment to take out a $5 million or $10 million piece of equipment. It's a no-brainer. Tank warfare is finished, and all of these floating targets that the U.S. has out in the Mediterranean, if there's any major conflict, they're going to disappear fast too. So it's all in drones. Now, one of the things that they're doing, the Russians are apparently very good at this, is radio frequency jamming drone signals. So what the next generation of drones is, and the Russians may already have them in the field, is they have limited AI so that the operator can find the target and point the drone at the target. And if the drone signal is jammed, the drone's AI takes over and steers it right into the target. Doesn't need the operator anymore. And now we're also talking about drone swarms, where the swarms are talking to each other. And I haven't heard of any that are operational at this point, but they're certainly being developed. So you'll have swarms of drones that go out, and it will be an AI function where they're talking to each other, and whether they're designed to kill individual infantrymen or take out pieces of equipment, depends on the technology. But this is where it's going, and it's moving fast. It's incredible.
It's an ongoing cat and mouse game. Like the the arms race is such. And I know, like, just in my last, well, let's see now. I was in Afghanistan in 2009, and I was actually part of the drone detachment. I was tech support for the drone detachment for Canada, and we had a very large bird. It was an Israeli bird, and so it was basically the size of a Cessna. And there, it carried an electronics payload strictly, really. And with the commercialization of drones, though, I was in Iraq in 2019, and the a lot of our adversaries in theater there, Shia militia groups, ISIS and the like, they had gotten wise to the use of this drone technology to just, they would fly a grenade in or something like that, or sometimes it was just for the sake of harassment. They would fly into the base, and then we'd all have to do our drills and get up out of bed and stuff like that in case there was any kind of an explosive payload attached to it. And what we did there, what was with some limited success, was the jamming, like you mentioned. And most of the commercial drones out there, they have a subroutine installed so that when the signal is jammed, they return to base. They'll just go back to whatever point they took off at. But now, like you're saying, now that the bad guys have gotten hip to that, they're changing the subroutine so that it will continue to pursue its target. But I think that would be assuming it's already locked onto a target. So we might have to jam them out further than that. And then, it might be more than just a jamming signal. It might be a hacking signal, that kind of thing, where we would take over the control of the drone. That seems like it'd be a lot more complex. It wouldn't be that as simple as jamming. And insofar as the drone swarms are concerned, the Chinese are already deploying them for entertainment purposes. They can use them to make a lot of like Chinese dragons in the sky and things like that. They're very impressive, actually. I don't think that they're to the level that they are, they could be weaponized at this point, but it's not far from that. So yeah, that is the direction I think that warfare is going in. And again, it's a cat and mouse game. So it's an arms race. So it's about the next innovation to overcome the latest innovation. And what I think we have going for us in that regard is that free minds win in when it's a race for innovation. What you'll see in a lot of like the Chinese steal their technology from us for the most part. So if we just decouple from them, then I think that would solve a lot of our problems. And they don't seem to be quite as capable in terms of like innovation. They have a lot of patents in China, but if you compare them to, say, like if you go by patents per capita, now, first of all, a lot of that is stolen, so it's the numbers are a little bit overblown. But if you compare them in patents per capita to, say, South Korea, then you can see that South Korea is absolutely blowing them out of the water. And I think the difference is because in a communist system where people's minds are stifled in a kind of Orwellian prison of fear, and they tend not to be so bold in their decision making, And so we would have that going for us in the free world, is in terms of the long-term outcomes for this arms race.
And is that where the private sector comes in?
Yep.
You know, because that's really, even though the U.S. government is only spending 140 million on AI research, these private companies like the companies run by Elon Musk and X and Grok and OpenAI, they're obviously investing huge amounts of money, and there's competition even among the different companies for dominance in this industry. So that ultimately may save us.
And another good
So,
point too
Fair.
is how many fighter jet systems or like helicopter systems are already automatic. Like a lot of the camera systems are already automatic. They pinpoint their their targets. It's not far off. We're really not far off.
The thing is, it's like a lot of the technology we're talking about here with regard to drones and targeting of military assets, that kind of technology that we're discussing is already it's here being used right now, but AI will take all of that to a whole new level because it will be faster, it will be autonomous, it will reduce the number of human beings who need to control these drones. You could have one person sort of releasing a whole swarm of them, as Ian mentioned, and they could be think for themselves, go out there and be programmed to attack these targets, and or have police dogs roaming neighborhoods searching for criminals, whatever a criminal is, to the robotic police dog armed with a machine gun on its back. You know, citizen, comply or else you will be vaccinated. Right?
Yeah.
Is that
Fahrenheit
where we're
451.
going? Is that where we're going?
Yeah, it's the mechanical hound that can remember the scent of 10,000 men and has never failed to hunt one of them down within the city limits and euthanize them by lethal injection on live TV. Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh, I thought I haven't been watching CBC News lately. Maybe I should.
I think we're at the point where it's like we need to be careful when we make stuff up, because we can make the stuff up and then we make it real decades later when people write these science fiction novels, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Star
I
Trek
think
is
we're
ripe with that. That's why we have MP3 players. That's where MP3 players came from, was Star Trek and having all the music in the database and everything like that.
Well, there you go. It's communicators and phasers, right? Star Trek.
What's an MP3 player?
A lot of what they're doing, though, I don't know if I would call it prescience as much as I would call it observation. I think that like Orwell, Huxley, Ray Bradbury, and the like were careful observers of human nature and social trends, and so they would tend to just sort of follow those social trends that they were observing, say in the lead up to the Second World War, in the case of Orwell and Huxley in particular, and then just exaggerate them to their logical conclusion. And so, Orwell tended to focus on the tyranny of the pain. Huxley tended to focus on the tyranny of the pleasure. And we see elements of both in the current tyranny. But also, I think it's worth throwing in that the one thing that they failed to account for, though, because 1984, for example, was basically a prediction of this is what the future will look like 50 years hence. He published it in 1934. And so the title of the book was 1984. But the social trends did not persist. We saw it go back the other way, right? Where we went from total war and brutal tyranny the world over to ushering in like a new high where there was a massive economic boom, population boom, new technologies, higher standards of living than the world has ever seen. And so this idea that human history is linear is really kind of a modern conception just within the last 200 or 300 years that we've adapted. But our ancestors seem to have a better appreciation for the fact that there is a cyclical element to human history. So It's not necessarily the case that it always ends in dystopia. We do turn things around the majority of the time.
So there's some reason for hope. Are you hopeful, Brendan?
I don't know. We should talk about the sex robots, because that makes me not hopeful. Because I mean, we all, I don't know if anybody here has seen Futurama, but I wish we could play the bit about sex robots where they basically predict like the end of the world because little Jimmy is too busy making out with his robot to go and do his chores or get a job or go to school. He just stays home and makes out with his robot all day. So once that happens, I mean, that's a whole new level of getting taking ambition out of people, I think. When you start
it
introducing
certainly
them.
isolates people more and eliminates human contact. That's one of their goals, I think.
Why do I need to strive for any type of status in my life when I could just stay home and make out with my sex robot? Like
that is a concern. I guess for the sake of argument, I'll throw in a counterpoint. We're social creatures. We're organisms. We're biological. So sex with a robot is not really going to provide the same kind of chemical satisfaction that you would have from sex with a woman. And rates of depression tend to inversely correlate with frequency of sex. So we need like that kind of human contact in order to be, fully satisfied. And so I don't think that, I hope that we won't just cuck ourselves into oblivion with the sex robots.
There's a principle involved here, and it's the principle that's at the base of AI programming and genetic programming, stuff like that, and it's a selection process in which and there's a probably more understandable example of giving antibiotics to cattle, or let's say even in India. They prescribed antibiotics for tuberculosis, and they were effective. The problem is that people would take them until they felt better and stop taking them at that point. If you go to the doctor and they prescribe an antibiotic for 10 days, they say don't stop after 5, take the full 10 days. And there's a reason for that, because if you stop after 5, it's killed off 99.9% of the bacteria, or maybe even more. But even one bacterium, if it survived, it's genetically now being selected to be stronger and resistant to that antibiotic. So if we have a world in which we have sex robots and a good portion of the population is playing with sex robots instead of people and not procreating, fine. That'll reduce the population to a subset which weren't trapped by this, probably a lot more thoughtful, and as a result, you'll have a much stronger survivable population. So it's not the end of the world.
That's what the globalists want, Ian. That's what the globalists want, guys. They want less of us because you're all too busy with sex robots or not even being able to get a job as a trucker at McDonald's. So they want you to be. They want you gone.
I think that's a pretty good take, though, Ian. I mean, human beings by default are polygynous, and monogamy is kind of like an innovation of our ancestors to act as a bulwark against revolution, because dominant males tend to hoard the fertile females and cut lower status males out of the gene pool, master slave species after all. And that is actually, from an evolutionary perspective, a really good way to advance the species. But at the same time, it leads to all this instability. We see that in particular in the Middle East, where they're still widely polygynous. And so, so the males tend to revolt because they don't really have anything going for them if they don't have a wife. It's something that we need very deeply. But maybe if all of the beta males wed their sex dolls and just leave all the most fertile, desirable females for the alphas, then we would actually see human evolution get a bit of a boost.
Well, it could get pretty complicated if the
argument
android
holds.
sex dolls get to a point that we saw, say, in the movie Blade Runner, where Decker's love interest looks like a human, acts like a human, feels like a human, can't tell the difference, not even sure if she is a human or an android. He didn't know she was an android until the end of the movie. And even then, he comes to the conclusion, well, basically, what difference does it make? If you're in love, you're in love. And so he just goes with joy.
I think there's something more carnal at play that's going to take much longer to overcome, to be able to, trick your limbic system into believing that you're having sex with a real human, or, producing the same endorphin release, that kind of thing. It's a long way away from that. There's all kinds of chemistry that comes into play and so on and so forth. So
yeah, and look at Musk with his neural implants and stuff like that. And he's not the only one who's going in that direction. There's a lot of research, I'm sure, going on with neural implants, and they'll be able to stimulate the endorphins or whatever you need. So.
Yeah, sorry guys, we lost our Rumble channel, so I'm trying to reconnect it here now.
I've been hearing
hopefully that brings us-
it's getting attacked quite a bit, huh?
Yeah, there were some problems the other night as well.
Some DDoS attacks,
and
apparently X is still good to go.
And we're back up, and yeah, we're on Twitter. At least we were. Yeah, we're on X. Yep, Twitter, X, whatever. Okay, we've reestablished contact. The mothership is flying once again.
Very good, sir.
There is this letter, though, that's supposed to be authentic from the staff at OpenAI to the board. And it was making the rounds on media. Here's Business Insider with their take on this. The story was broken by Reuters. The staff saying that they can't work for a company that, what's it say here? It says, at the sources told Reuters that a powerful artificial intelligence discovery prompted several staff researchers to warn the board that one source told Reuters that after it contacted OpenAI, the company internally acknowledged the existence of a letter to the board and a project named Q or Q Cubed. I'm not sure. An OpenAI spokesperson told the news agency that this was only alerting staff to the report and not commenting on its accuracy. But this is basically technology that allows AI to not only think, but think about thinking. And they are saying in this letter that it poses an existential threat to humanity.
Why?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I can read more of the actual letter here if I can bring it up to the point where I can actually see it. OpenAI is the world's leading AI company. We, the employees, have developed the best models and pushed the field to new frontiers. The products we built are used by millions. The process through which you terminated solved Sam Altman. This is when he was removed and then reinstated. Made it clear competence that when we all unexpectedly learned of your decision, the leadership team of OpenAI acted swiftly to stabilize the company. The leadership team suggested that the most stabilizing path forward, the one that would best serve our mission, company stakeholders. Where I don't understand. I don't see in this letter where it says that.
No.
So I'm not sure. That's what the media reports have been reporting. And maybe I don't have all the details of that letter up. I've got a second copy of it here, but comments on that? Anything?
Sounds highly speculative.
Yeah.
They're mostly worried about having competent leadership at the helm, especially on the technological front. And this is a problem that we've seen for decades now, where the more cutthroat corporate yuppie business types end up in charge of these big tech firms, and then nobody's buying Atari anymore because ET sucked. They failed to appreciate, what made it great in the first place, and it was all the kind of innovation, engineering, that sort of thing. And that's also why SpaceX and Elon Musk's companies work so well, is because he's the CEO and he's also a highly competent engineer. So, yeah, I think that's probably what's happening. Is OpenAI is going the way of Atari.
So, yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at this letter honestly doesn't seem to match up with what I was reading and seeing in videos, sounding the alarm bell on this stuff. This letter doesn't seem nearly as, doesn't seem to embrace the doomsday scenario to nearly the degree that these people providing their analysis of it have. Maybe they're just creating a lot of clickbait.
Sounds like it. I mean, you know what the media is like, right? They like to hype these things.
Oh yeah.
I think
Reuters made a big deal out of it.
I think it does pose an interesting question though, like why is it bad, and does it pose any good for people? And I've seen some interesting perspectives where commentators and the like have used Chat GPT to turn around their finances, where they say, "Build me a new budget." Well, you know what? That you don't have to go to RBC and talk to some stupid bank person. You could just have Chat GPT figure out your finances for you. Like, that's the type of thing that could revolutionize someone's life for very little money.
Yeah, they'll be wearing a barrel before long.
And I do think that, that's a good point, that we often talk about how a lot of the blue collar jobs are going to go away, but we very rarely talk about the impact that it's going to have in the white collar sector. Something like a lawyer, for example, I mean, that's all they're really doing is running an algorithm. So you could replace lawyers with algorithms, judges with algorithms pretty quickly. Now, do we want to go completely hands off on that and have no human oversight? No, I don't think so. But just think of the number of white collar jobs out there that are essentially just people running algorithms. A doctor is just troubleshooting, and an AI could probably troubleshoot a great deal better. And the number one killer of people, I think, in North America is probably medical malpractice, or it's up there anyway. So you could probably eliminate a lot of that stuff, where you have somebody who's medically qualified overseeing the system, but the system itself would provide vastly better results than primates.
Well,
I think BuzzFeed is like, I think they got rid of like over 80%. I think it's mostly AI now, BuzzFeed.
Yeah, journalists could probably replace a lot of journalists too. Mm-hmm. I mean, we did, right? BuzzFeed, there was that massive laying off there around 2016, something like that. And they were the ones that were going around saying, learn to code, to all the coal miners who were getting laid off. And then the next thing you know, probably because of these technological innovations, we see massive layoffs at BuzzFeed, and then all over Twitter, people were telling them, learn to code. It was pretty awesome.
I had a conversation with my wife earlier this week, or last week rather, and I said, I was thinking, the technology we had back in the, let's say, 60s or 70s, we had a really good life back then. We had a dryer, and it did something really weird. It dried clothes, didn't connect to the internet, it didn't play songs or anything like it, just dried clothes. And it had one little dial. How long do you want to dry for? 40 minutes, 60 minutes? That was it. And that thing broke over its lifespan that we had it for, 25, 30 years, broke 4 or 5 times, and I repaired it each time. It was so simple. Same with a washing machine. It didn't have all these settings and big controls now. It just washed your clothes, and that was fine. The the telephone we had, and initially it was a rotary phone. I don't know, probably nobody knows what a rotary phone is now.
I grew up with a rotary phone.
Yeah, so did I.
Okay. And then we had touch tone. And that was fine. All I wanted to do was make a phone call. I didn't want to take pictures or, put up word games for me to play while I was talking to someone or anything else. Just make a phone call. Life was much simpler, much more focused, and it was very good. Nowadays, it's for me, it's not better. It's a lot more complex. There's a lot more choice and sophistication, but it is not a better life now than it was back then.
And this new technology is going to take us into much more complicated areas. And what you're looking at on the screen right there is the result of a request that I just made in ChatGPT, which is I asked it to write computer code for a cron job for automatic inventory updating on a WordPress website, and it spit the code out in about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So computer programmers, coders, your jobs are in jeopardy for sure.
Well, we're still not going to need them to write the AI.
That's right. Now that is an excellent point, because I've viewed this technology in much the same way that I looked at the assembly line and Henry Ford, the Industrial Revolution, disruptive technology. Anytime something new comes along, people are always afraid of it. They often try to stop it. We know what the Luddites were all about, right? So is this a similar scenario right now? I know that a lot of people will be displaced from their jobs, but that will then free them up to maybe do other kinds of work, maybe less labor intensive work. It's just going to it'll force people to shift and do other things. Or is this the kind of technology finally where we're reaching the end of the line where there will be no jobs for people because the computers will do almost everything, not enough jobs to go around? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Probably in North America, that'd be the biggest thing, because we don't have manufacturing or hardly any manufacturing. Everything is overseas. So I made an example about you don't need an accountant because ChatGPT will do it. Well, a lot of the jobs are just these white collar things that we do in the city. So I could see that's a different ball game than machines that didn't require like little children to do dangerous stuff in the Victorian era.
So it's disruptive technology that for the first time in history really will displace white collar jobs where people have been required to go to college or university and get skills requiring knowledge based jobs for the first time being displaced, where throughout history it's been labor intensive jobs through industrial automation.
Yeah, I think what we see consistently throughout the course of these kinds of major technological revolutions, all throughout history, is that we do adapt. And what ends up happening with the new technologies coming on the scene that eliminate the need for human labor, it always brings in like there's a period, there's a rough period of adaptation, but it always ushers in a higher standard of living across the board, and we're always able to support more people with more technology, larger populations and the like. So yeah, I mean, there's going to be some pain, but I think it'll be short-term pain for long-term gain.
Ian, thoughts on that?
I think I want to give it a bit of thought. Yeah. It strikes me as, well, I'm not sure.
See, with say the assembly line and the adoption of the assembly line, as Henry Ford did, that that improved economies of scale and efficiencies. It made automobiles affordable for the masses. So that was a tide that rose all boats. Everybody in society benefited from that because now everyone who was gainfully employed could afford to buy an automobile. It improved people's lives. It brought our countries closer together, our people closer together on a continent that is massive. It's huge, right? So it expanded the economy. Everybody benefited. It actually created jobs on assembly lines for people, but the masses, everybody had benefit from the efficiencies that were realized. Even though Henry Ford got incredibly wealthy because he controlled the company and the shareholders became wealthy, society in general came to benefit because of expanded employment, improvement to the economy, and access to consumer goods, automobiles and related products that were produced much more efficiently on scale, mass production, so that we all ended up benefiting. Even you didn't have to work for Ford. There was still spin-off economic benefits for everyone. And it ultimately created a whole lot of new jobs as well.
No, actually, it destroyed jobs. A net destruction of jobs.
I would disagree with that.
You look at who
narrowly, yes. Like if you want to make people stand a hand assemble all the cars to produce the car, yes, you need a lot more people to produce it. It does eliminate the number of man hours required to produce an automobile, but the overall economic benefits, the efficiencies gained by society by putting people on wheels, mobilizing the entire country, giving people the productive capacity that came from having access to mobility, able to transport goods much more efficiently to market, that created efficiencies throughout the entire economy that then created spin-off economic benefits and more jobs across the entire economy. It transformed our society and created massive economic benefits. It generated millions of additional jobs. It didn't eliminate jobs. That was the narrow focus, yes, of the Luddite crowd who said, we can't have the assembly line. I'm going to lose my job. Yeah, you're losing your job, but society as a whole, massive economic benefits from the assembly line. That's just an example. So I'm hoping that this new technology will ultimately result in a similar kind of benefit.
I tend to agree, Rick. I think that technology is a force multiplier after all, and it frees us up to do other things. It makes us safer. The jobs are not nearly as dangerous as they once were, and so it tends to promote human flourishing. And as with all change, there's going to be some discomfort, during the transition period. But over the long term, it does, like you said, a rising tide floats all boats, and I think that it will raise us to new heights.
Mm-hmm.
That has been the trend too throughout history.
Yeah, even with the automated self-checkouts, yeah, you lose some of those minimum wage jobs that people, have, which is a drag for those people potentially losing those minimum wage jobs. But now you have to have people who program those machines and maintain them and program them and install them, and and they make a lot more money than minimum wage. All those people on minimum wage, I guess they have to go wash the cars that are still coming off the assembly lines, assuming we're going to have an EV industry at all, or a gasoline powered car industry. I don't know where all that's going, because the government's trying to jam all that stuff down our throats too right now and transform it when it's not being market driven at all. But that's just me.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I'm not on board with the EV agenda. I mean, any locomotion requires a power source, and a battery doesn't generate power, it only stores it. So all you've done is you've just sort of offshored your power generation to the power company. So now you have a coal powered car instead of a gasoline powered car. And of course they're short range and all kinds of issues with that. And probably, if you really want to reduce emissions, if you believe that carbon dioxide is a pollutant, then The better way to go would be with something like a hybrid, where you have a generator on board, so you don't end up freezing in the dark on a Canadian highway somewhere when you can't make it to a charging station in time.
See, I think, Rick, if you make the argument, well, such and such produced all these benefits and society has had all these great benefits, and look at how society has benefited, you've got to look at the other side. Look at the incidence of drug addiction and drug abuse in our society today. Look at the incidence of obesity in our society today. That's the other side of the coin of the revolution that you're talking about. This is what it's produced. You take a job away from someone, and it destroys them psychologically.
Mm-hmm. No doubt about it. And we've seen that throughout history, though, right? I mean, it's disruptive, and people have to find some way to adapt. And I think that's where we as a society need to find ways to help people make that transition. I'm not so sure that the government we have today is competent enough to do that. And I think that they do have a vision of the future where they see what AI is going to be doing, and they're trying to.
They've been talking like that for decades, and look at where we are. How successful has it been?
I think it's been wildly successful. I mean, just you could use a single metric of like lifespan. And prior to the jabs, lifespan was always going up and up and up and up. And it's a really remarkable thing, because apparently all mammals have effectively the same number of heartbeats in their lifespan, except for humans. We're the only ones that have really overcome that. The lowly stance of our origins, as Darwin might have put it. So I think the net benefit, and that's what we're really kind of talking about, is like, in the aggregate, is it a benefit or is it a harm? And I think in the aggregate, it's the benefits far vastly outweigh the harms. But everything in life is a trade-off. Like there's no one decision that's going to be 1,000% beneficial with no drawbacks. There's always some kind of a drawback. So it's just a question of doing that cost benefit analysis in any given decision. And I think when it comes to developing new technologies, like I said, in the aggregate, it's overwhelmingly beneficial to humanity.
Yeah, and I think turn of the century, Victorian England, you look at a lot of that and you see, like, they used to have to stuff children in factories. Well, the little kids could go into small, tight spaces. Well, they made the technology better. They made it safer, so you don't need to send people in to do dangerous things. I mean, look at it this way. You could say, well, they used to have to pay people to go in and empty out your chamber pots at your doorstep every day. Modern plumbing took that job away. Are you going to say, well, look at this huge atrocity, we don't have somebody coming by to pick up our chamber pot anymore? It's like, well, that's something that has made everybody's quality of life a lot better, and a lot of health and safety and sanitary things. The benefits of turning the chamber pot picker-upper guy, for lack of a better term, into a plumber has saved a lot of lives.
Seems to me that
I don't disagree.
The future depends on us developing AI and embracing it. Even our national debt, AI could be a pathway out of debt, because AI represents a massive increase in efficiency and productivity. If we are able to utilize that and leverage that efficiency, we can become incredibly productive. And I've been saying for a long time, what we need to get out of debt is more productivity. It's not austerity. It's not higher interest rates. It's not modern monetary theory. It's productivity. We need to grow our way out of this by producing wealth. And AI could help us do that if it's used in a positive way, if you understand what I'm getting at. And I'll throw it over to you, Jeff, because you're nodding, and I think you're kind of on track with what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, if we could replace hedge funds and mega corporations run by Larry Fink with an AI that could run all these calculations on where your investments need to go in any given moment in time, that's going to produce incredible economic growth, I would expect, and that is probably that's another one of the best metrics for human flourishing is wealth. It's and wealth at the end of the day is a surplus of resources where, if we live in scarcity in the ancestral environment, you spend every moment of your waking life just trying to stave off starvation and freezing and exposure deaths and that kind of thing. That's what we see too. Like, we complain a lot about the technology of, say, air conditioning, for example, or the fact that we're heating our homes with oil, but exposure deaths are way down, and more people do die from cold, even in, say, Brazil, than they do die from heat. But quality of life is improved. The surplus resources, like the wealth gained by applying AI to markets, I think would be hugely beneficial. But again, there are need to build safeguards in there.
And it's also its application in agriculture, industry, where these systems are able to think and go beyond our abilities as human beings to solve problems. I know that the developers of AI are looking at this as with hope that the AI systems will help us come up with solutions to increase agricultural productivity, to feed far more people around the world.
Yeah.
That would help us become much more productive, create more wealth. And if we're able to produce more food, more cars, more of everything, it reduces prices, makes things more affordable for the masses, while at the same time creating additional wealth, which we can then put toward paying off our national debts.
So a lot of the kind of jobs that like seem to AI, especially like chat GPT based things are going to impact. There's going to be things that are the Laurentian elite. I'd seen some numbers and figures like 1 in 4 Canadians now work for the government. It's like bigger and ballooned more than ever before. And of course, a lot of that is the bilingual kind of top 5% of society, right? A lot of their clerical jobs could be like wiped out overnight, like just gone.
A lot
So
of them.
And I think that once the liberal elite kind of come to that conclusion, we'll see. It'd be interesting to see what kind of legislation that they put in place about that.
When you
Just a
start to
thought.
attack political ideology or economic ideology to this technology, I'm already seeing, and you saw it even in that interview with that ex-Google developer. He's basically taking a very socialist, maybe even communistic sort of viewpoint on this. It's like we can't just turn this over to the private sector. We can't have people profiting from this. We need to be creating something that's just for all humanity, that needs to be shared. But I'm not sure that I agree with that, because if we just open source all this stuff and make it available around the world to all people, there are bad actors out there, including other nation states who are our adversaries, who will, I'm sure, turn around and use this against us. And that's why we are in an arms race. It's a national security issue.
Who are our adversaries?
China,
Russia, whether they're economic adversaries or military adversaries or terrorist groups or whomever, there are always bad human beings out there with bad thoughts who do bad things. And if you look around the world at any given time, the majority of countries out there are run by people who are pretty dictatorial. We're kind of an odd duck in the overall geopolitical scheme of things here in
Canada,
the West.
Yeah, we're not run by a dictator, are we? I don't think we are. You're right. I got that.
Yes and no.
About Justin.
I hear you, man. I hear you.
Well, I think the tyranny is the default state of the human species. Like I said previously, like we're a slave master species by default. Social hierarchical primate domination is kind of what we're hardwired to do, and we are the exception in the West. About 80% of the world is still stuck on that default setting, and yeah, and it's not a problem that we get to solve in our lifetimes. So we'd better harden up to make sure that all our hard-won gains are not lost the minute one of these
They're gone.
authoritarian regimes with aspirations of global dominance gets a hold of a competent AI.
And don't misunderstand what I'm saying, Ian. I don't want to go to war with China. I think that would be a really, really bad idea. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying we need to be realistic that nation states are always in a struggle for power against other nation states, and we need to be aware of that. And if we're not, and if we just lay down our defenses and just open everything up, I think that we're just asked. Well, we absolutely will be in trouble because somebody will come in here and just rule right over us because we have a lot of what the world wants: resources.
Yeah, and it is also, I think, it's the story of Cain and Abel, which I think is basically a story about why envy is a deadly sin. And that's what all of human history was, essentially up until the advent of capitalism, was just one society raiding a more prosperous society. It was all looting, theft, domination, massacres, genocide, this kind of thing. But like through the innovation of capitalism, we find ways, like you say, to get that rising tide that lifts all boats. We find ways to collaborate. I like, Milton Friedman's discussion on the pencil. If you've ever seen that, where he talks about the lead comes from this place, the wood comes from that place, the rubber comes from that place. All of these people hate each other. And if you put them in the same territory together, they would probably kill each other. But here we have this phenomenal collaboration going on, and it promotes prosperity, which promotes peace.
You have a different view on it, though, Ian. You think that we should open source this stuff and make it available to the world and work on it somehow collectively?
It's an irrelevant proposition. The world already has it. There's nothing special about AI technology. Nothing special about machine learning. That's being taught in the universities, 22 decades ago when I was there. It was being taught. You could take courses, you could get degrees in it. And in fact, when I was at Carleton, it was interesting because in the lobby of the office building, they had a big kind of like a bulletin board that had glass on it, and pictures of all the graduate students. And I looked at it one day and I thought, okay, I went through there. There were only, out of maybe 50, 60 graduate students, there were only 2 that I could say, well, those are white. The whole place was Chinese or Indian. I mean, a lot of them will have ended up in industry here, making lots of money, and a lot of them went home with the technology. China is probably the dominant country now in terms of supercomputers. As you pointed out, they're the dominant country in terms of AI development. And part of it is culture. We have a lazy culture. And they don't. So all we have to do is just keep on going. We're killing ourselves here.
Well, I don't know if I would go so far as to say that we have a lazy culture. I think we have more like a demoralized culture. See Yuri Bezmenov on that one, where he talks about active measures, or is it cultural subversion? I'm kind of drawing a blank right now.
Ideological subversion.
Thank you.
Right.
Ideological subversion. Right. First stage of ideological subversion is demoralization of the young when they go in there into the schools and give them all these kind of communist nudges to make them hate their society and basically turn them against their society. And he said he gave that interview in 1984, and he said that that had already started. They already completed the first stage of active measures, which was the demoralization of the young. And that those people graduated in the 60s and we're now in our institutions actively working to turn them against us. And so the
Sexual
people
revolution.
Yeah, that's a perfect example, as was the case with
first wave feminism.
Third wave, I think, was the one where it really went kind of culturally Marxist. First wave would have been more like
just
Marie
needed the
Wollstonecraft,
first.
like
just needed the first. They knew it was.
These are recurring social trends as well that I think are also part of the whole cycle of history. And but with third wave feminism, it definitely went culturally Marxist at that point. And the Vietnam War was another really good example of the kind of demoralization where instead of believing in the society enough to go to war essentially with the Chinese Communist Party in a proxy war in Vietnam, as say the silent generation did in Korea, for example. What happened in Vietnam is, the phenomenon of fragging became rather prominent, where they murdered over 800 of their own officers in their sleep by tossing their fragmentation grenades into their bunks. The Viet Cong actually had orders not to engage first because the Americans were engaged in these seek and evade missions where officers, once they identified that the enemy was present, they would actually evade them instead of engage them for fear of being murdered by their subordinates. And then there was the massacre of My Lai that went, that lost the popular support for the war. And after that, so that would be the same generation now that has been active in our institutions, working in our institutions, that would have filled the white collar class, like the additional white collar jobs that came with essentially the last high following the Second World War, which is really where all of our technology comes from. It came from the Second World War, and it hasn't fundamentally changed since then. The only thing that's really changed is the manufacturing process has gotten a lot better. So the components are smaller and the networks are bigger, but the technology itself hasn't fundamentally changed. That would have been the same, the boomer generation that filled the additional white collar jobs created during that period in the wake of the Second World War, that graduated in the 60s and is now running our institutions today. It seems like we're already at the fourth stage of active measures. This is the stuff that's being normalized at this point. So when it comes to like the difference between us and the Chinese, it's that by and large, the Chinese have been teaching their people in school to believe in their society, that their society is the best one, and we haven't been doing that for a number of years, at least since after the Second World War. All you ever really hear about the West is all this evil colonialist colonizers, blah blah blah, this kind of thing, and that's all Russian propaganda that started back in the 50s, and they've been using it quite extensively in Africa, for example, to exacerbate these grievances over colonialization. But the fact of the matter is, all the best places for humans to live in the world are former European colonies. And we really do have all the best values. It has everything to do with our values, but we've been teaching people for decades now that the West is the kind of warmongering, bloodthirsty, colonizing oppressor. And it's all viewed through that Marxist lens.
That's what it is. The American Empire.
Well, yeah, and I think that if we were just a little bit more truthful with people about our own history, like going all the way back to the Crusades, for example, like we talk about the Crusades, like it was the worst thing that ever happened, and the blood in the Holy Land ran up to the bridles of the Crusaders' horses, and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is, it was a counteroffensive because the Caliphate came exploding out of Arabia, and within 100 years of Muhammad's death, had an empire like 3 times the size of what the Romans ever had. And it took the West 200 years, roughly, to mount a counteroffensive to liberate the Holy Land from the oppression that Christians and Jews were suffering under the Muslim Caliphate. And so, but the thing is that nowadays we start the history with the counteroffensive, and we say, look at all this killing that the West did. But we never really tell people like how the fighting started to begin with, like in say in India, for example. India was a former British colony, and you know what? It's a hell of a great country over there in Egypt, in Southwest Asia. It's probably the best one of all its neighbors, and they don't tell you, the story about how the fighting started. I can remember reading the account of this lieutenant colonel who was leading a campaign in India, and what they were doing, they used to have a practice over there called seti, where when a man died, they would throw his wife, his widow, onto the funeral pyre with him so that she wouldn't become a burden on the society. And they were preparing the funeral pyre, and the lieutenant colonel asked, what are you guys doing? And when they explained the practice to him, he said, that's barbaric. And they said, well, it is our custom. And the lieutenant colonel said, well, where I come from, we hang men who kill women. So you guys build your funeral pyre, I'll have my carpenters build the gallows, and let us all participate in our own customs. So there were always campaigns of liberation, and that's not to say that they didn't get messy and that there weren't, like, we're humans, for crying out loud, we're messy creatures.
India was a huge mess before. It was always a big mess. And I just want to throw like one more point on that. Like, we always say like how evil our past is, but it's like if you look at the Aztec civilization, for example, where they were slaughtering thousands of people a day in the name of their religion, and it was like something that was evil. and now you have like people like Neil Young saying he wrote the song "Cortez is a Killer." It's like, okay there, bud, whatever you say.
Yeah. Cortez and 500 conquistadors took on the entire Aztec empire. No, that's not what happened. It was all of the surrounding tribes sided with the conquistadors because they were sick and tired of being butchered and eaten by the Aztecs.
So I like that. That's an important point, Jeff. It's the two really takeaways that I would get from the conversation we've had. One is your point about the cyclical nature of everything. Nature in its entirety is cyclical, and our nature is cyclical, and our behavior is cyclical, and our society is cyclical. And the people who actually recognize that and study it from a cyclical point of view have a much better way of understanding where we are and where we're going. So cyclicality, which is difficult for linear thinkers to grasp. And the second is causality. And that is everything we think, we always think in terms of, well, this started here. But no, because it had precursors. And the precursors had precursors. So any starting point you pick is arbitrary. And there's always a previous one that you can go back to. And I hope I understood that that's what you were saying.
I was saying that we've been, our education system has been turned into an indoctrination system, and so
I agree.
So I just offer a counterpoint to the idea that we're a more lazy society than the Chinese. I think that we're a demoralized society, and it goes back to the institutions, particularly the university and now the public schools as well. We should be teaching our kids, our true history. Like, we're the good guys. I'm not saying we're the perfect guys. I'm just saying that we're better than everybody else. Like,
oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
and
rates of violence, like
to your
rates
point,
of violence. Who treats women and minorities better than the West?
Nobody.
Nobody does. No.
And to your point, have you guys ever gone down the rabbit hole about what TikTok in China looks like? Talking of like AI. TikTok in China is all about like personal, like improving yourself personally, inspiring you to become better, like how to become it's all about making yourself a better person. But if you switch your VPN to like the United States on TikTok, it's like people who have like these self-inflicting stuttering impediments because they're all brainwashed through this this crazy system. It's so evil how they've turned this on our young people.
Well, it's just to show the power of what I would say is propaganda. Another church in northern Alberta has been set ablaze, burned to the ground. This is the third one in the last week that I'm aware of. Here's a story. Here's a clip from a counselor in that community. This is Javier Church in northern Alberta. This was sent to us by one of our regular viewers, part of our Maverick family. Wood Buffalo RCMP say officers responded to a structure fire, fully engulfed in flames. Just another example. This, in my estimation, is the result of a constant campaign to erode confidence, trust, faith in religion, our churches, Western society. I think we're up now over the last few years, over 200 churches since the mass grave story broke that have been torched across Canada, Christian churches. And here's the counselor from that community.
Good day, everyone. Counselor Shane Janvier here. Woke up to some news this morning that someone had set fire to our old church here in the community. You can kind of see behind me here the still kind of smoldering here, and it's burnt right down to the ground. Really sad. As a member of chief and council, I got a voice here, but if you're listening, you're a community member, you have a voice as well. Early indications appear to be arson. We got the RCMP here, crime tape here. We've got some fire investigators coming out to kind of look into this a bit further. As a community, we got to stand together here. The significance of this old church here in the community, lots of celebration here at this church over the years. Lots of weddings, lots of baptisms. This is a place where we've come to say our last respects to our loved ones, our ancestors. Myself personally, like my first Holy Communion was here at this church. And it's enough's enough. We got to start looking out for one another as a community. We're treaty people here, treaty Indians here that belong to this nation, this band, this community. We're Dene Sulin people. If we're going to make statements that this is our land, we're going to fight for this land, then we damn well better learn to respect our land. And that's not respect. That's not respecting our community. So I urge you, if you know something, contact the RCMP. If you wish to remain anonymous, contact Crime Stoppers. If you feel more comfortable, bring that information to myself, and I'll bring that forward to the RCMP as well. Just by happenstance today, we're also going to have a community get together here, a Christmas dinner here in the community. It's a time for us to come together and, kind of be thankful for one another, have a nice dinner with one another. I welcome you to come to the multiplex, come and have a Christmas dinner, come and say hello, come and have a chat. But, this is a community here, and let's start looking out for one another. That's all I got to say at the moment. So, Masicho.
And I would say that's the result of many, many years of anti-colonial rhetoric.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would just reiterate that a lot of this anti-colonial rhetoric traces its roots to Russian propaganda, going all the way back to the 50s, and it's part of the psyop. It's it's an anti-Western psyop. Aufhebender Culture was the motto of the Frankfurt School in Germany. It all kind of goes back to Germany, and Aufhebender Culture is in destroy their culture. This I think all stems from the psyop that was perpetrated stemming from the Kamloops residential school discovery of what is probably a septic tank by so-called ground penetrating radar. Radar doesn't really penetrate ground. All it can do is detect soil disruptions. I worked with a very similar radar when I was working with the drone detachment in Afghanistan, and that's all it really does. Is we used to use it to find command wires for IEDs, and it'll display, if the soil has been disrupted, you'll be able to see that in bright orange, where everything else is just kind of a dimmer color. So that's all they ever really had was a soil disruption. There's never been any remains or any kind of forensic evidence to support the idea that there are bodies in there. There was another site, I can't remember the name of the place now, but they had a similar finding in the basement of one of the churches, and they performed the excavation and found out that it was rocks. So they half-masted our flags for 6 months. Shame on Canada. It's a Maoist. It's a Maoist kind of cultural revolution that's taking place, where there's heavy praise heaped upon the insiders and shame heaped on the outsiders, and it's quite effective.
Trudeau
he's Maoist.
Trudeau paid for all everything to do with Every Child Matters. This has just been so destructive to our country, like beyond destructive. I've never would have imagined that this much damage would have been inflicted in Canada with 8 years of Justin Trudeau. But everything to do with the Every Child Matter movement and that psyop, it was all funded by Justin Trudeau and his government, and all of the commie elites in the university systems that have been trained and with this, because I broke this even before Lauren Southern came out. I remember I looked very heavily into this when it came out, and you had the University of Alberta and their anthropology department stating we have unearthed. Well, I know a little bit about archaeology, and I know a little bit about ground penetrating radar, and these people more often than not get it wrong. Geophys is not an exact science. It can tell you where to dig, but it's not always right.
I'm going to throw in something entirely from another direction, and then I'll leave it at that. And that is, I'm currently studying the Book of Revelation, and I'm near the end of it, but it fits in to the opening of the fifth seal. And the fifth seal opens up religious persecution, and it's in its later stages, martyrdom of the faithful. So we haven't entered into the stage of wide-scale martyrdom, but religious persecution has been going on for Christians for quite a while now. And this is, for me, just another example.
Yeah, I would throw in that I think that Revelations is something like I know it's Revelation. I got to get it right, but is something like the Orwell of its day, where somebody, I guess presumably Matthew, is a very careful observer of human nature and social trends, and they had a kind of style of writing that tended to use a lot of metaphor and but what we're seeing is these same social trends recur. And I might as well just say it, but it's a fourth turning. That's what it's called. The crisis era through which we're now living is called a fourth turning, in accordance with Strauss-Howe generational theory. So Neil Howe is a demographer and economist who published a book in 1991 with Bill Strauss, who's a master of literature, and they went over human history basically and market trends in particular, and determined that these crisis eras recur at 4 generational intervals. And so, like, you know, we see a lot of the same patterns. That's why people are looking to the Bible right now, and they can see we tend to write more about the crisis eras than we do. We tend to write more about the hard times than we do about the good times. And they're supposed to serve as warnings to us. And we can see these same social trends that we might see in something like Sodom and Gomorrah, or, you know, Abraham's sacrifice, you know, the old sacrificing the young, the Sodom and Gomorrah, the kind of debauchery and collapse, the Tower of Babel, where, you know, we're all sort of talking past each other at this point. Like, we don't even have a common language anymore, because the Marxists have a kind of postmodernist language that they speak, and we don't mean the same things that we used to. It's an era of balkanization into various factions, polarization, this kind of thing. And it's Tower of Babel would be analogous to, say, like the collapse of the Roman Empire, whereas in the Roman Empire they had two official languages, one Greek and one Latin. But after balkanization occurred, now we have all the European languages where nobody can, you know, communicate anymore, but they're all Greek and Latin derivatives. So this is the cycle, essentially. It's called Strauss-Howe generational theory. So that's why you see a lot of those same patterns in the biblical stories.
So this is about largely information warfare. And just to turn it kind of back to the AI thing, we've seen the impact that propaganda, information warfare can have here at home. We've gone through decades of this kind of attack, I would say. And we're seeing AI used now in the Middle East, for instance, in the Israel-Hamas war, to create information warfare campaigns, propaganda with unprecedented effectiveness. And these are some examples here. These are actually some bad examples. This is from DW, where they're showing some of the stuff that really made the rounds in a substantial way, and they're helping people kind of identify what some of the AI fakes look like. But I just kind of wanted to draw your attention to this, because I'm absolutely seeing so much of this stuff online that I am at a point where I cannot really tell sometimes what's real, what isn't, between the stuff generated using just the technology that has traditionally been available to us, combined with AI stuff, actors in some cases that are being used to just make propaganda videos. I've absolutely seen dolls being carried that are obviously plastic dolls in some staged videos that I did not run, but I've also been fooled on a couple of occasions with old recycled footage from conflicts in other wars that they've presented on X as though it's from the Middle East. I've been fooled with that stuff. And we're seeing even people like Ben Shapiro have been fooled with fake stuff. This is another fake image and created entirely with AI. This one here, the AI wasn't very good, maybe, because there are too many arms, too many fingers and toes on the feet and the hands. This is far too clean to be real. And I'm seeing images like this. I saw images like this out of Lahaina as well, after the wildfires that took place down there, that a lot of people just believe they're real. So it's highly effective. This obviously to me is fake. It's just, you look at that, it's just far too clean. It just smacks of being fake. But that being said, it gets better and better every day. There are actual videos created with this. What are your thoughts on this with regard to the impact it's having on our perception, like of what these wars are? It's being used to generate sympathy for both sides. Both sides, I think, are engaging in this kind of activity and this information warfare. I think, honestly, Hamas in this case seems to have more support, more help, and they're doing a better job of creating material to generate support for their side. They have social media influencers, a whole team of them out there as well that I think are doing a much more effective job. But I'm just interested in your take on this, especially from you, Jeff, because I think your area of expertise will give us real insight into this.
Well, yeah, it is a challenge, obviously, with AI coming on the scene. But like you said, you can spot the fakes, at least for now. And the AI does tend to be pretty crappy when it comes to generating hands and feet. It always seems to get like the number of digits wrong for some reason. So we have that going for us. But this I think fits in really well with what we were discussing previously about the anti-Western psyop that is being prosecuted right now. And you know, Christianity is a Western phenomenon for all intents and purposes, and so that's why we see the churches burning, they're turning our own people against us. And for all intents and purposes, Israel is a Western power in the Middle East. And you know, I think it's very telling that the Chinese Communist Party removed Israel from its maps, for example. I think that they're tickled pink that people in the West aren't able to come to sensible conclusions, which is what Yuri Bezmenov said would be the outcome of active measures. And so, what I see, I think there's a very deliberate attempt to deceive coming from Hamas in particular, and not really so much from Israel. I think there's been some misinformation around, say, the 40 beheaded babies. But if you trace the roots of that story, it goes back to a journalist. It wasn't like the IDF put that out there. And then Joe Biden got out there and lied about it, because that's what Joe Biden does, is, you know, he makes his living lying. It's again, the whole colonizer narrative. You see that there, the oppressor narrative, invaders, colonizers, yada yada. And they want to start the history at 1948, when in fact there's all kinds of relevant history that goes back centuries on that particular topic of Zionism in particular. Like, Zionism has been around since the late 19th century, with the first Aliyah taking place, the Aliyah, the migration, especially from Russia to back to the Holy Land, because there were so many goddamn pogroms against the Jewish people. And so they felt that there was a need for them to kind of gather in one place for the sake of safety. And there was the first Aliyah, you know, in the late 19th century, and the second Aliyah in the early 20th century. And the migration continued back there. And the land, by and large, was purchased from landlords in Beirut who didn't give a hoot about the land itself. And what was once, you know, a bustling city in the old world in Jerusalem, with aquifers and architecture and the like, you know, it essentially fallen to ruin, and green pastures were turned to desert by the camels and the nomadic tribes. And they didn't really invest in the land. They were nomads, and Palestinian was essentially synonymous with vagabond around the time, and they never had an independent state. That's another thing that's out there. I mean, it was Judea initially. It was Sumerian Judea, and in the Jewish rebellions of like 152, the Romans crushed the Jewish kingdom and renamed the land Palestine in order to break the Jewish connection to the land. So again, I'm just sort of reiterating that there's a lot of history that's being cut off, and everybody wants to start it at 1948, when settlements were being destroyed and things like that. But then they don't tell you like why the settlements were destroyed. They don't tell you that those were reprisal operations, because the people living in those areas wouldn't stop killing Jews. And another, I guess, good compare and contrast to draw would be the expulsion of the Rohingya from Myanmar in 2015. I mean, that was a Muslim population in Myanmar that, after repeat attacks against police stations in particular, they were expelled, and it did create a refugee crisis and the like. But you didn't see everybody flooding the streets and screaming at Santa Claus when the Rohingya were expelled from Myanmar, because if there are no Jews, then it's not news, I guess. But for all intents and purposes, I think I've come to the conclusion that Israel are the good guys in this one. There really was a massacre on October 7th. I showed tons of footage from it on my Veterans for Freedom podcast there, just to try to dispel this nonsense about, false flags. There's all kinds of hell to pay, I think, for the failure on the Israeli security forces side. My understanding is that all of the chatter, as in all the intercepted communications around that time, was around Hezbollah and the West Bank. And so they had redeployed a lot of their forces and a lot of their efforts and focus onto the West Bank and onto Hezbollah. And it looks like they got fooled. And how they were so wildly successful, I mean, there were multiple factors. There's probably terror tunnels that they used to get in under the fence. And the paragliders are something like a new phenomenon that were never really deployed on that scale. And people have this perception of the Iron Dome, like it's literally an Iron Dome, but it's only 90% effective. So if you fire 100 rockets at once, then 10 of them are going to get through. And they just overwhelm the system. And the paragliders, the system, it's a radar system at the end of the day. And I was a radar technician for half of my career in the military. And I can tell you, like, air defense radar is an incredibly complex beast. And, it's only so effective. And it's designed to pick up fast moving targets. So something like, because radar will, by default, pick up everything. It'll pick up bird flocks, it'll pick up weather, all kinds of stuff that gets in the way of what you're trying to see. And what they're trying to see is missiles and rockets and mortar shells. So, it would be tuned to pick up those fast moving targets and to eliminate the slow moving targets as clutter. So it wouldn't have seen, paragliders coming over the fence, but yeah, a lot of this kind of stuff has just been spun beyond the reach of all rational discourse at this point. And I think it's sort of capitalizing on the success, the earlier propaganda successes of our communist adversaries on the West. And it's as they say in jihadi circles, there's a proverb from around the Middle East there that says, after Saturday comes Sunday, as in after we get done with the Jews, we go for the Christians. So I think that, if Israel falls, then the West is next.
What a interesting amount of hypocrisy, like, around the whole Israeli thing, especially like, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, get rid of the colonizers. Well, the Palestine was literally named by the Romans, as you had pointed out. And it's like, so the colonizers gave them the region a name. And it's so messy, but Rick is absolutely right about their propaganda capabilities. That I recently got rid of YouTube Premium. And in doing so, I get all the ads and commercials and stuff. Well, Hamas is paying for advertisement with Google, and they have a substantial amount of advertisement showing damage and destruction and being like, oh, all the poor little children are hurt. Give us money, give us money. This is allowed on Google.
Yeah.
Like, we all remember the apocalypse from, like, what was that, 2010, where... And now this is what it kind of leads to. This is absolute insanity. Mm-hmm. Hamas is fucked around. Now they're finding out and they don't like it.
Yeah, and it's a kind of cry-bully tactic. I mean, and that is, you see the same trends again. It's like they want to start the history with the counter-terrorist operations into Gaza, and they talk about proportionality and things like this, and it just confuses the whole issue. Like, war is not supposed to be proportional. It's supposed to be overwhelming and get it done with, quickly. And what would be proportional? Like, did they rape and behead the exact number of Gazan women? For example? Well, no, I think it's a counter-terrorist operation. People are calling it a genocide. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen any indications of that. I think there have been some missteps by the IDF because, like I say, they're just humans and they're messy. And in a couple of spots, I could see some IDF soldiers as individuals losing their cool in some pretty intense situations. Like, it's a really intense situation. It's really hard to tell.
War is messy. Like, it always has been messy, and it always will be messy. I think one of the things you like to point out is how they wanted to do like a Christmas Day truce in World War II, and Canadian troops shot them. It's like, so like that.
Right.
That's the type of stuff that happens in war. My favorite thing about this whole Israeli thing, though, is the exposure it is giving to the far left wackazoids that are deep embedded into our society. The what is it? The Kohl's bookstore company, Indigo. They have a downtown store in Toronto. Well, bunch of these people had went to that store and they smeared red paint all over it and did all kinds of damage. Well, Toronto police got involved, and what they had found is that people who were involved in this operation were people who are key leaders in the QP or QP, what's it called there? The union, the Public Service Union.
Public Employees.
Yeah, so QP was behind it. All kinds of like prestigious university workers, people who hold like high levels of authority with universities, things that we already knew were infiltrated by like these communists, and they're all behind it, and they're all for Palestine. They love it, but this is showing their ugly face in such a way that I would have never have imagined would it be possible.
Yeah, it's hard to tell where QP ends and Antifa begins at this point. And that's I think a good inference that you've made there, where you're talking about the high level people that are involved. And I'll just throw back to my earlier comment that it was like Yuri Bezmenov pretty much explicitly said that it was the boomer generation who were demoralized in the schools in the wake of World War II. And as you can see, like they said they were openly communist in college, and as I mentioned, massacre, My Lai, fragging, the sabotage of the Vietnam War, which was a perfectly just war. It had all the legal and moral justifications as the Korean War, and it really came down to a question of whether you'd rather see our fellow humans living under the conditions of North Korea or South Korea. But they wouldn't take up the cause. They wouldn't carry that torch that was passed to them at that time. And now they're running our institutions, and this is what happens in a fourth turning: is it's when the witch hunts come back. The boomer generation follows the generational archetype of the prophet, as in those who found our religion. So Muhammad would have been a prophet. And when they reach peak institutional power in their early elderhoods, that's when they reign in the new theocracy. And if you just go back and you look at like the biblical stories, every time you see that elder prophet with a long gray beard, it's hard times for the rest of us. And it's the same for Star Wars, or for say, Odin and Thor. It's the elder prophet and the young hero. The millennials follow the generational archetype of the hero, which is the same generational archetype as the GIs in World War II. And as Neil Howe said in The Fourth Turning Is Here, that was just released in July, it's really coming down to a question now of whether the millennials will follow anyone. Because that's kind of what the hero does, is he's servile, civic minded. They come of age in a time when things during the unraveling period of the saeculum, and so they have a sense that things are going in the wrong direction, and they're looking to the senior leaders of our institution and saying, like, we want to fix this, we want to help. So what do we do? And right now, what they're saying is destroy the West.
Well, if you go back to World War II and Tokyo Rose, or the dropping of pamphlets during Vietnam, Korean War, back to those times, that was one level of information warfare where you're trying to convince the other side to give up or sympathize with your side. But now today, with artificial intelligence and the quality of the images being produced, we're not seeing just an opportunity for the victor to write the history. We're seeing both sides, all sides in any conflict now, engage in an activity where they're actually trying to write reality or create reality in real time through the internet, at least a reality in people's minds, so that they're generating support, which then translates into funding. In this case, Western funding for the war in Ukraine, Western funding for Israel. You undermine public support in Canada, in the United States, and the people put the pressure on the government. They lose their taste right away for the conflict. In fact, we're seeing here in the West people cheerleading now, or for groups that traditionally, I would say, had been seen as enemies of the West. We've seen people actually take up the mantle and prop Osama bin Laden up as some sort of an actual hero here in the West because of, I would say, this ongoing information campaign. It seems to me we're getting to a place where, as well, we have to, we don't know what truth is anymore. It's becoming incredibly difficult to the point where it's going to force us to be more selective as people become more savvy to this, more selective in where we get the information from. And some system might have to be set up where we have verification of authenticity of video, authenticity of images. I'm not sure, but Brendan, when we started this podcast, this live stream during the convoy, that's why we did it, because the mainstream media was just outright lying about so much surrounding the pandemic and the COVID measures. We knew that the mainstream media would be lying about the convoy, so it was our intention, I'm sure you recall, to just put up as many live streams as we could so that people could have a real visual reference in real time without any edited video to keep all sides honest, is what we said, right? And now we're at a point with what's coming out of these other wars where it's the same kind of thing, but now we're being bombarded with fake, and some real stuff and a mix of stuff. And it's really difficult sitting here on the other side of the globe to determine what's real over there where the conflict is unfolding. Thoughts?
Rick, I've contributed my 2 cents worth on AI. As I said when we talked in the call before, I didn't have a lot to contribute, but
no, Ian, you've contributed a lot. I'm very grateful for your time here tonight.
I said I wanted to bug out after about 2 hours. So, gentlemen, I'm going to leave the conversation. It's been invigorating, and I'll leave you the 3 of you to it, and I'm going to bid adieu. So take care.
Pleasure chatting with you, Ian.
Thank you, Ian.
Good to see you again, Ian. It's a pleasure as always.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Take care.
Take care.
Where were we?
You had something very profound that you were saying.
I think, what I would say is, geez, thank goodness for Elon Musk and his acquisition of Twitter, now X. And I found the community notes to be a very powerful tool in a lot of this. When I see some things now, people will send me things, and this goes, this was the Maui fires or the fires in Nova Scotia and stuff like this. And I can remember, there was stuff being circulated about this helicopter that was pouring some kind of an accelerant down and starting fires. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to give it a few days and we'll see what the community notes say. And then sure enough, it came back like, yeah, this is actually footage from such and such a year. It's a fire break that they're making here. This is how they stop the fire from moving past this point. It's a controlled burn and blah, blah, blah. So I found that to be very helpful. And also, now I haven't done this personally, but it appears to me, at least from my read of the different posts on X, that people are feeding some of this imagery into one AI or another in order to determine whether or not it was in fact artificially generated. So that could be an effective strategy as well. But I haven't actually tried it myself. So,
What do you think, Brendan?
I had something on the tip of my tongue, and then I got distracted with Ian. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, I mean, it's just, those are good tips, Jeff, because it is difficult to know sometimes whether what you're looking at is real or not anymore. I've stopped running a lot of stuff on this channel because it'll pop up. People will send me stuff, and I'm looking at it, and it looks very real. But until I'm really confident that what I'm looking at is authentic, that it hasn't maybe been edited or is being presented out of context even, or is just outright artificially generated, I'm very reluctant to put a lot of stuff up and show people footage, especially from the war zones. Very reluctant. What kind of impact do you think this is going to have as we move into this coming presidential election and the next federal election? This, I think, is a threat to our democracy.
Yeah, it is. It is ideological warfare. I think at the end of the day, it's a battle for the human mind. We gotta win it. It's a matter of survival. I would just I guess proper target identification is necessary here. So what we're seeing across Canada, like we're seeing these mass demonstrations, anti-Israel or pro-Hamas, whatever way you want to frame it. And it's quite bizarre to see things like Queers for Palestine. I think somebody might want to tell them to go to Palestine sometime. But
like I said, the hypocrisy with the whole thing is
it's ultimately, I think, doomed to failure because there are so many internal contradictions. Like it just has to fail. It's not a coherent system of thought. But Judith Butler, I couldn't help but notice, she is the one who first conceptualized gender as a social construct back in the early 90s. And she was a third wave feminist and seminal thought leader in the progressive movement. And what she said is that Hamas is part of the global progressive movement. And I think that demonstrates my point rather succinctly, that progressivism is an anti-Western movement. The only thing they ever show any progress towards is communism. So that's where the battle lines, I think, are drawn in ideological warfare.
Yes.
And as far as threats to democracy go, and I hate using this word, it makes me feel dirty, but the mis and disinformation, I hate that word so much. It makes me want to run up a wall, but it's all working. The CCP is on record as wanting a minority government with Justin Trudeau in power, and we have that overwhelmingly. It's working. That's what they wanted. That's what they got. And you know what? I don't know if that's what we're going to get again, but Justin Trudeau has made his declaration that he will be running again for the 2025 election.
Yeah.
And he will have the full support of the underground CCP police stations, all of the how many AI bots are they going to have spewing out all kinds of rhetoric about this stuff. I'm on Twitter and I get a lot of things liked by bots. There's so many bots. It's crazy.
Yeah. And Jeff, you said that identifying the target accurately is important. And I think, the target is really, in this case, China, communists. So, and I think those who have infiltrated our government and our institutions, who are working from that ideological point of view. Any thoughts on what we do moving forward?
Prepping is good. We could, I have a sense that things are definitely going to get worse before they get better. So we want to be self-sufficient, get the hell out of the cities, wait for the collapse, and then be ready for the rebuild. But none of this is really anything new. Sun Tzu said in the 5th century BC that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. So that is the strategy, like you pointed out there, Brendan, is, to get that despicable minority government in power in perpetuity. Because they like minority governments because it keeps us at each other's throats, and we'll be so busy fighting each other and no longer working together that will collapse economically. And then we'll be so desperate that they can be our saviors, and we'll have to accept whatever solution they tend to impose on us. So, I think that it's going to be a pretty sticky situation. But the thing, I think that there's basically what it comes down to is we got to get back to our roots as Western Civ. And we are the people of philosophy. And, I say that because, the Eastern traditions like, Sun Tzu and Confucius and Wang Tzu, they tend to be really just kind of aphoristic, like they do. I think that they have a lot of value, but they lack method. Whereas in the West, we have this interrogative method where we value debate. and logic. Like that is a Western conception, logic, reason, this kind of thing, to build an argument, a syllogism, major premise, minor premise, conclusion, that kind of thing. So there's a lot, I think, to be learned by studying the classics. And, especially like it all goes back to Socrates, really, the modern Enlightenment. And he was a war veteran who, in my read of the story, it would have taken place, his execution would have taken place in a second turning. So that would be the time when that would be analogous to, say, the Vietnam War, when the generation coming up, they're prosecuting the new spiritual awakening, as Muhammad did during his early life. And what he called it at the time was sophistry. It's a lot of kind of, highfalutin gobbledygook just to baffle gab people with bullshit. And the antidote to it is reason. It's philosophy. It's logic. And so what I would advise, I think, our citizens to do is to kind of go back to those roots, Aristotle in particular, with the laws of thought, and just memorize like 10 logical fallacies, something like that, some 10 common logical fallacies, and you'll be amazed at how effective it is in debate. I mean, this is just kind of what I did throughout the course of my late career in the military, in the boardrooms at National Defense Headquarters and whatnot. Like it's such a useful tool. You can really see where the arguments fall apart. And if you just slap something on somebody like, this is the ignoratio elenchi logical fallacy, beside the point, this is the point that we're discussing right now. And this is what, say, Chrystia Freeland does all of the time, is she commits the ignoratio elenchi fallacy. We saw with she was being interviewed by Vashi there, and Vashi was raising a point about the quality of life for Canadians and how Canadians are struggling and people are living in the streets. And her answer is always, we have a AAA credit rating. So she's asking a question about the quality of life for Canadians and how displeased Canadians are with their economic performance. And the answer is, well, our creditors are very happy with us, so we're doing good. So she's making a point. It's a valid point, but it does not address the central issue. So
cancel your Disney Plus subscription, you'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think Disney was very happy with her about that.
No, that
So
kind of
that's-
backfired.
Yeah,
So in the
Disney is evil
face,
anyway, screw them.
so in the face of this artificial intelligence or AGI revolution that we're facing, I guess the takeaway from this tonight is, don't run away from it. We have to learn to cope with it, engage, find strategies to move forward in ways that we can use this to benefit ourselves, while at the same time finding ways to protect ourselves, put pressure on government to take positive actions and maybe impose some regulations on this so that it doesn't get out of hand. And the answer to this new technology really comes down to common sense, philosophy.
Mhm.
And I'll throw it out to you guys for some final thoughts tonight.
Yeah, I guess I would just, reiterate what I've said already. Work on hardening ourselves as individuals, being able to be self-sustaining and independent of the state. Get away from the cities, because that's where people are utterly dependent. And once those supply lines and systems fail, they'll be the ones eating each other first. So you want to stay away from those places. And like I was just saying, I mean, take in a page of ancient wisdom every day, and you'll find more truth, beauty, wisdom revealed, so many millennia ago, that has been lost to us. I think it's been hidden from us. We don't teach it in schools anymore. The coping strategies that we're talking about, the meditations of Marcus Aurelius, what I get from reading Marcus is one of the greatest men in history, suffers with all the same anxieties and self-doubt that I do. It's all part of the human condition. And we've been humans for a very long time. So I think we should get back to our roots, familiarize ourselves with the lessons of our ancestors who lived through these crisis eras in the past, and we will persevere in the end. And on the other side, like I said, just by dint of natural attrition, like the institutional leaders who have failed us and tyrannized us throughout all of this, they're not going to be around forever. And the people who are coming up behind them, this is why the human history has a cyclical nature to it. So the people that are coming up behind them that are rebelling against this, like, we're going to be in charge sometime between say 2028 and 2033. So that's when the pendulum swings back the other way. That is, like, I never liked the political pendulum analogy, because there's no force of gravity in the analogy, and that is what makes the pendulum swing. Well, the force of gravity is demography. It's changing demographics, and as the boomer generation retires and Gen X displaces them from peak institutional power, we're going to be course correcting for all of the excesses of their wielding of power. And we'll see, a much brighter future, new technologies, higher standards of living than the world has ever seen. The trick in the interim between now and then, I think, is just going to be surviving. And we got to keep in this fight. And keep a level head the whole time. Like, this stuff will wear you down, I know, but we got to keep opening up minds and doing everything we can to prevent what is probably an inevitable collapse, and at least adopting some strategies to weather that storm. And then on the other side, we'll have another generation in charge that isn't going to is going to have an appreciation for exactly how much suffering the heavy hand of government can really inflict on its people, and they're not going to be making the same mistakes.
Give us some final words of inspiration, Brendan.
Turn off the TV, read your Bible, brush your teeth, go to the gym, quit being a bitch, and thanks for listening. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Now, there are some words of wisdom.
Well said.
Folks, thank you, gentlemen. It's been a great program, great discussion. And folks, we'll be back tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Catch you all on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.